The ocean is a vast, indifferent graveyard. Most who succumb to its depths leave behind debris, oil slicks, or at least a final, desperate distress signal. But in the bitter winter of 1872, the Atlantic Ocean gave up a secret that defied all laws of logic and reason. Imagine standing on the wooden deck of the Dei Grazia, a British merchant brigantine cutting through the choppy, grey swells halfway between the Azores and the coast of Portugal. The lookout spots a speck on the horizon, a fellow sailing vessel, the Mary Celeste. She's yawing strangely, her sails set awkwardly, drifting with the aimless, terrifying grace of a ghost. As the crew of the Dei Grazia draws closer, the silence rolling off the approaching ship is deafening. No helmsman stands at the wheel. No lookout hails them from the bow. When boarding parties finally step onto the creaking wooden deck, they find a ship that is, by all accounts, perfect. The cargo in the hold is entirely intact. There is plenty of food and fresh water. The captain's personal belongings, including his family's possessions, remain undisturbed. Yet, not a single living soul is aboard. 10 people, 7 sailors, a captain, his wife, and their 2-year-old daughter have vanished into the salt air as if they had never existed. This isn't just a maritime mishap, it is the birth of the greatest nautical mystery in history. What happened in those final moments? Did they jump? Were they taken? Or did the ship itself drive them into the abyss? To understand the tragedy, we must first understand the players involved. The Mary Celeste wasn't always a vessel of mystery. She began her life in 1861 in Nova Scotia as the Amazon, a ship that seemed shadowed by misfortune from the start. Her very first captain fell ill and died on her maiden voyage, and she suffered a series of collisions and groundings before being salvaged, sold, and optimistically renamed the Mary Celeste. By 1872, she was under the command of Captain Benjamin Briggs, a man of sterling character. Briggs was a devout Christian, a devoted family man, and a highly experienced mariner who had spent most of his life navigating the unforgiving sea. He was not a man prone to panic or irrational decisions. Briggs wasn't alone on this fateful journey. Accompanying him was his wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia. They left their 7-year-old son, Arthur, at home in Massachusetts to attend school, a heartbreaking decision that would ultimately save his life. The crew consisted of 7 hand-picked men, mostly Germans, described by contemporaries and previous captains as first-class sailors and peaceable, quiet men. This wasn't a ship of mutineers, malcontents, or drunkards, it was a disciplined, highly capable, and family-oriented environment. On November 7, 1872, the Mary Celeste departed New York City bound for Genoa, Italy. In her dark hold sat 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol, a volatile, flammable, and dangerous cargo, but one Captain Briggs had handled before. As the coastline faded behind them, the mood was optimistic. Letters sent to family before departure spoke of a sturdy ship and a ready crew. They were sailing directly into the teeth of the North Atlantic winter, but for a man of Briggs' caliber, it was just another voyage. Little did they know, they were sailing toward a void from which no one returns. On December 4, Captain David Morehouse of the Dei Grazia recognized the vessel drifting erratically ahead. He knew Benjamin Briggs personally and was immediately alarmed by the ship's strange, unguided movements. After receiving no response to his signals, he dispatched his chief mate, Oliver Deveau, to board the vessel. What Deveau found would haunt nautical history for over a century and a half. The ship was, as Deveau later testified, a wet mess. Water was sloshing in the bilges, and the ship's rigging was tangled, but she was fundamentally seaworthy. The strangeness lay not in destruction, but in the eerie, specific details of what was missing. The ship's solitary lifeboat, a small yawl, was gone, and the tackle used to lower it was hanging loosely over the side. One of the ship's 2 water pumps had been disassembled, lying useless on the deck. The ship's compass was destroyed, its glass face smashed, and the binnacle had been moved from its usual secure place. Yet, everything else was eerily normal. Below deck, the crew found 6 months' worth of food and water untouched. The mythical stories of half-eaten breakfasts and warm cups of tea on the table were later embellishments, but the reality was just as unsettling. The galley was neatly stowed, and personal effects were exactly where they should be. Sarah Briggs' sewing machine sat quietly, the crew's pipes and tobacco were left in their quarters. No sailor voluntarily abandons his pipe. The ship's logbook lay on the mate's desk. The final entry was dated November 24, 10 days before discovery, placing the ship near the Azores. There were no frantic final scribbles, no mentions of storms, mutiny, or illness. It was a routine navigational entry. Whatever terror gripped the Mary Celeste happened suddenly, unexpectedly, and with such overwhelming force that a seasoned captain ordered his family and crew to abandon a perfectly good ship for a tiny, vulnerable lifeboat in the middle of the open ocean. Captain Morehouse and his crew managed to sail the Mary Celeste to Gibraltar, claiming salvage rights. But instead of a hero's welcome, they walked into a wall of suspicion. The investigation was spearheaded by Frederick Sully Flood, the Attorney General of Gibraltar, a man infamous for his paranoia and flair for the dramatic. Sully Flood was convinced that foul play was the only explanation. He aggressively interrogated the De Grazia crew, suspecting them of murdering Briggs and his men to claim the lucrative salvage reward. When the evidence failed to support this, Sully Flood pivoted to a theory of mutiny. He pointed to supposed bloodstains on a sword found in the captain's cabin and marks on the ship's rail. However, scientific analysis later proved the blood was merely rust, and the marks were ordinary wear and tear. Furthermore, mutineers would have surely stolen the captain's valuables or the cargo, yet the ship's lockbox was untouched, and the alcohol remained secured in the hold. As official investigations stalled, public imagination ran wild. Newspapers published sensationalist theories that captivated the Victorian world. Was it a coordinated attack by Moroccan pirates? Unlikely, as pirates would not leave a valuable ship and cargo behind. Did a giant squid or sea monster pluck the crew from the deck one by one? Absurd. Was it an elaborate insurance fraud orchestrated by Briggs and Morehouse together? This made no sense given Briggs' unblemished reputation and the fact that he left his entire fortune and property behind in America. The only clue that held any real weight was discovered deep in the cargo hold. When investigators opened the main hatch, a powerful rush of noxious fumes escaped. Out of the 1,701 barrels of alcohol, 9 were found to be completely empty. Unlike the others, these 9 barrels were made of red oak, a porous wood that had allowed the highly volatile alcohol to slowly leak and vaporize into the confined space of the hull. This invisible, highly explosive gas was the ticking time bomb that set the stage for the true climax of the tragedy. Today, modern historians, sailors, and scientists have pieced together a consensus that is far more tragic than any sea monster or mutiny. It is a story of a fatal miscalculation made by an experienced man acting under immense pressure. Imagine the scene on November 25, 1872. The Mary Celeste has just navigated through severe, rough weather. Captain Briggs, knowing his cargo is highly explosive, is understandably on edge. The porous red oak barrels have been leaking, filling the hold with alcohol vapor. Perhaps a sudden change in temperature or pressure caused the main hatch to blow off with a terrifying rumble, or perhaps the crew simply opened it to vent the fumes, and a cloud of noxious, explosive gas poured out onto the deck. At the same time, the ship's sounding rod used to measure water in the bilge had been dropped or jammed. To check for flooding from the recent storms, a crew member had to disassemble one of the pumps, temporarily disabling it. Confronted with a seemingly uncontrollable leak of explosive gas, a disabled pump, and the terrifying possibility that the ship was quietly taking on water and about to blow up, Captain Briggs made a split-second, defensive decision. He ordered everyone into the small yawl. He didn't intend to abandon the Mary Celeste forever, he intended to trail behind her at a safe distance until the explosive fumes cleared or the danger passed. They tied the lifeboat to the main ship using a long peak halyard, a heavy rope used for hoisting sails. But as they waited in the small boat, the winds suddenly picked up. The heavy sails of the Mary Celeste caught the gale, the ship lurched forward, and the towline snapped. In an instant, the tragedy was sealed. Briggs, his family, and his crew watched in utter horror from a tiny, open boat as their massive, perfectly sound ship sailed away from them, faster than they could ever row. They were left stranded in the vast, freezing expanse of the Atlantic, dying of exposure or drowning within days, while their ship drifted on, preserving the mystery for eternity. The Mary Celeste might have been forgotten as just another tragic maritime loss if not for a struggling young doctor and writer named Arthur Conan Doyle. In 1884, 12 years after the event, Conan Doyle published a sensational, fictionalized short story titled J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement. He changed the ship's name to the Mary Celeste, added fictional details like a bloody sword, a half-eaten breakfast, and a rogue passenger, and presented it almost as fact. The public devoured it. The story was so popular that the fictional details permanently infected the real history. Even today, many people refer to the ship by Conan Doyle's misspelled name, Mary Celeste. The ship itself met a very unglamorous end. She was returned to service but carried the dark stigma of a cursed ship. Crews refused to sail on her, and she was sold at a massive loss several times. Finally, in 1885, her final captain intentionally ran her aground on a reef in Haiti in a desperate, clumsy attempt at insurance fraud. The captain was caught, and the Mary Celeste was left to rot away on the rocks, her timbers eventually swallowed by the sea. Yet, her legacy remains unsinkable. She has inspired countless books, movies, radio plays, and documentaries. She is the ultimate blank slate, a canvas upon which we project our deepest fears of the unknown, the unpredictable ocean, and the fragility of human life. The story of the Mary Celeste is not ultimately about ghosts, aliens, or sea monsters. It is a deeply human tragedy.